Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Those Millennial Pediatricians. I'm Aniksha,
I'm Dr. Deshna.
and we are here to talk about all things pediatrics delivered to you in nice bite-sized pieces. So today is a big milestone for both of us because we are now free.
Freedom is here.
Yeah.
We just graduated residency like a couple weeks ago, and we
Like
had our
three,
last, yeah,
4 days
3 weeks ago.
ago. I don't know what day it is anymore, honestly.
Time honestly blurs because we have our lives back
Yeah.
finally, and we're just doing whatever we want, which we haven't been able to do in probably like 10 years. 10 years, right?
Yeah. I haven't known what a hobby meant for 10 years, so now I have to actually figure out what hobby I'm capable of.
Yeah, maybe we can give a little more context.
True.
So basically, this goes for all physicians, doctors. You do 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, and then minimum 3 years of residency, which kind of depends on what specialty. You go to the longest can be up to like what, 7 years?
To 9 even?
Yeah, so we're pediatricians, so we did 3 years of residency, but it's very arduous, super time consuming. Basically, our time is at the whim of our residency program. So we do nights, we do 24-hour shifts, you name it.
Yeah.
So
I think I calculated it once with our after-tax pay, and we basically get paid minimum wage to work upwards of like 90 to 100 hours a week,
yeah,
right? Like some weeks you're chilling and some weeks you're really just in the thick of it there all day. You come home, maybe you shower, go to sleep, you wake up and you do it all over again.
rinse and repeat. And then even if you're like kind of near family, you're like, sorry, I can't make any of the things that you're planning, birthdays, weddings, because I have work. I'm working all the time. Anyways, it's like super anticlimactic because you work up until your last day of residency and then it's like, okay, I'm done. Like, what did I just go through?
So I actually think the best part was our last shifts were basically you and I kind of being together or overlapping, where you had the day shift of a 24 and then I took the night shift of the 24. And I think it was so funny because I was like, "Are you done?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm done." I was like, "Are you going to celebrate?" And you were like, "I guess we can take a selfie in the hospital and then I'll go home," which was
I
very,
I felt zero emotion. Like my interns felt more excited for me
yeah.
than I felt excited. I think I'm just like, all right, we're done. Let's go home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting, but I just felt nothing at that moment.
I know. I wonder if it'll hit when eventually we realize this isn't just like a 2-week elective or something. We are actually not going back there.
Correct.
And I remember when I dropped off my badge and I walked out of the hospital, I was like, oh, I need to make sure I have my badge. And then I was like, oh, no, I don't have my badge because I just gave it back
Yeah.
forever.
Lead. Anyways, it feels great. We are both taking some time off before we start our full-time jobs, which is great. We do have one big hurdle to get through, which is boards.
Yeah.
So, to become board certified, we will be taking our exams in October.
I've actually gotten this question multiple times now where people are like, why are you able to work when you're not board certified? And so, if anybody's wondering, the answer is you are board eligible. So, as soon as you graduate residency, you are board eligible. Wow, eligible because you physically cannot take the boards until they are offered in October. So, you're allowed to work until then. And then ideally, you pass them and you're board certified. I think if you don't pass it, you can take it the next year, and some places still let you work, but a lot of places are like, why did you not pass the boards? So that's a little concerning that you don't have enough knowledge, and then maybe you might run into a snag. But
My question for you is, so I'm taking 7 weeks-ish off. You're taking a little more time off. What goals do you have for this time off? Like, what are you going to do?
I have to put together a plan to study for boards. Okay, the other thing I really want to do is like actually identify a hobby that I enjoy. Just like one thing so that when people are like, "What do you do in your free time?" I'm not like, "I sleep." And they're like, "But you have more time now. Like you can't just sleep all the time." And I would honestly be like, "I really can. I think you underestimate
You
me."
can't sleep and go on TikTok. Like, there
Yeah,
has to be more.
exactly. Honestly, reducing my screen time and then finding a hobby are my two big things probably.
Have you identified anything yet?
No.
Okay, that's fine. You have
No.
so much time.
No,
Yeah.
yeah. When I was in med school, I bought, like, a wood burning kit, and I thought that was gonna be my thing.
What is wood burning?
Basically, it's when you have like this little burning tool and you get a piece of wood and you're like carving, but you're burning into it. So you can kind of draw into wood and
Interesting.
almost like engrave it and do really cool things. I don't draw. I'm not creative. I don't know why. And I'm definitely don't work with wood. I don't have any carpenter skills. So I don't know where I thought I was going to do wood burning.
Listen, it's never too late. I want to do like a summer reading list. I'm
Yeah.
going to get an LA public library card because
Oh, that's
I mean,
big.
I just like didn't have the time to go or cared to honestly get one in residency, but now that we have that, now that we have more time, I'm going to go do that. I'm going to get a bunch of books and then maybe like I have a cooking account that I want to like film more
Yeah.
on and make like recipes. So I think I'm going to do a lot of that. And then I want to get my fitness level up. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I was never really able to stay consistent with anything. And now that we have time, I feel like I have time to set habits. And so I want to do that.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is another big one that I'm like, okay, I need to really figure out my fitness journey, figure out what kind of workouts work best for me.
Exactly.
Yeah, I started thinking heavy lifting would be the thing for me or like more strength workouts, which I think is important anyway, especially for women who eventually like, will go through menopause and osteoporosis and all of that stuff. But what I'm realizing is that there are certain workouts that are better for my body than others. So I realized doing like only like this like hit strength workout, my body was so upset with me and I didn't realize why. And then I went back to more of like a cardio lightweight workout. And that's been so much better for me. And I didn't realize that it would actually be that big of a difference. But when I did my East West medicine elective, and we were talking about like the principles of traditional Chinese medicine, and this is also in Ayurveda too, like your body types, like doshas and all of that stuff. I remember one of the attendings looked at me and he was like, based on your body type and your like frame size, he was like, your frame is just kind of smaller. And he was like, if you try to do heavy workouts, you will hurt yourself and you will hurt your body more. You should stick to cardio and light weights. And I was like, sure, whatever. And now I'm learning the lesson that he taught me 2 years later.
You're actually kind of right.
Yeah.
Yeah, ideally for me, it would just be like lift just enough to make sure my bone health is
Yeah. Like your muscle and
optimized. Like I
bone.
am not trying to bodybuild over here, but then also make sure my heart stays healthy by doing like, I don't know, low intensity cardio. I tried the whole LA berries thing and it was just too high intensity
I
for me.
can't
And
do
I was
berries. I want
stressed
to
out
cry.
during those workouts. I was
I
like, this is
know.
not for
Like
me.
my heart rate is higher than it needs to be because I'm just so stressed.
No, and
And you have to do like 20,000 jackknives. I'm like, I can't do that.
yeah, it's like I'm okay. Or like running 9 speed for like a minute on
Yeah.
these treadmills. Like I can't do
Oh my
that.
God. Yeah.
So anyways, lots to look forward to. What we're also excited to do is invest more time and energy into our podcast. We took a little hiatus because life got crazy, but I think when I speak for the both of us when I say we're excited to kind of invest a little more time into the podcast and hopefully get more content out for you all.
Okay, well, speaking of stuff to look forward to,
Yeah.
whether, there's some positive and there's some negative, and then we'll round it out. But
Yeah. Yeah. So we're doing a pediatrics in the news segment. This is something new we're trying. We hope to do this hopefully every few episodes or so, where we just kind of round up what's happening in the news related to pediatrics. A lot of it does have to do with politics, and I understand some people kind of don't use certain podcasts as their primary source of politics or like to stay away from politics. But I think us as pediatricians working in medicine, which right now is so unfortunately heavily influenced by politics, and it affects our day to day and how we treat patients and directly affects policies that in turn affect us. I think it's our job and our duty to kind of spread awareness on politics and the news as it pertains to pediatrics.
for sure, this isn't a political podcast, but when the health and politics are so closely intertwined and it affects the health of so many kids, we have to talk about it and talk about how it impacts our patients and other patients too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so I guess the first big thing we'll talk about is this whole thing around vaccines and how basically the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or the ACIP, as you've probably seen it across the internet, has been basically dismantled and rebuilt in a new way. And so essentially, RFK has dismissed all of those members. And now the panel includes a whole bunch of new people who are revisiting a whole bunch of topics that actually were resolved for quite some time, but we're kind of bringing them back, a little throwback, if you will. And essentially, there's a lot of thoughts around this. So I think the first one is that the original ACIP, and then also a lot of the AAP, including the chair and a lot of representative, Dr. O'Leary, and everyone else involved, really thinks that this is a dangerous move because we are potentially spreading a lot of misinformation and going back to reviewing things that we have a lot of evidence for, which we'll talk about in a second, and including a lot of people that don't have the right qualifications to discuss this can be really dangerous moving forward.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know a lot of these recommendations, these, vaccines that made it into these guidelines were recommended after extensive and thorough research. So the fact that essentially we have a politician on board who's dismantling all these professionals who have the degrees, who have the experience to give these recommendations, it's actually super concerning because now we have measles back on the
Yeah.
rise. Talk about in a little bit as we give our measles update, but it's kind of like what's next. And I think the AAP's stance is that we're still recommending all of these vaccines, but it's kind of alarming that people in places higher up are now kind of bringing topics that frankly have been put to bed regarding like the efficacy of vaccines. It's kind of now in discussion, and it could very well affect policies or rulings that are made down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Kim Schreier, one of the representatives, was like, I will blame you, RFK, for every vaccine preventable death that occurs. I think even Dr. O'Leary said at one point, he was like, I thought we talked about all this. Like, why are we bringing all this back up? We've done so many studies on so many of these different things. And I think it's a strong message, but at the same time, it really just speaks to how dangerous this can be. And I think it's great that the AAP is continuing to put out their own recommendations. And so if you're looking for recommendations, there's things like the AAP website, immunize.org. If you're worried about vaccine ingredients and want to learn more about that, we'll put all those links in our episode description. But things like the CHOP website, where they go through all the vaccine ingredients, those are always up to date and evidence-based and backed. So I'm glad we're doing things about it, but certainly it's very dangerous because it access that information in the first place. I would say probably the safest person to go to if you have any questions is really your pediatrician. We're all really keeping on top of this kind of stuff. We all can have those decisions with our individual patients based on what their needs are, or their conditions, or whatever. So that's always really your best bet, I'd say, is going to your pediatrician and asking them directly.
So on the note of vaccines, let's talk about a buzzword that's going around social media right now, thimerosal.
I think you said it right.
Yeah,
Thimerosol.
thimerosal.
In
I was
case
like,
anyone was wondering, we had to look up
you
the
had to look it up. I was
pronunciation
like, is it thimerosal or thimerosal?
because we haven't talked
We
about
haven't talked
Thimerosol
about it.
because it hasn't really been an issue because it's been
I don't know if you saw, there's a video circulating of RFK going on Tucker Carlson's podcast, and he basically stated that the CDC suppressed a study that was done in the 90s, stating, and in his words, that hepatitis B led to a 1,135% increase in autism. So what is thimerosal? It's basically a preservative kind of that contains small amounts of mercury. It's used as a preservative, or it was used as a preservative in all these vaccines in the 90s. That is, primarily used for microbial growth suppression. And essentially, there was this researcher in the 90s that led this preliminary study that showed kind of a link between thimerosal that was in all these vaccines and autism. And there was some concern at that time that there was some kind of association between these two. Essentially, what happened was after that, This researcher led a bunch of like larger scale studies, looked at all these various groups, and actually disproved those preliminary findings, right? So, but somehow this came up again that preliminary study was suppressed, and it actually there is concern that there is a significant link between this thimerosal and autism, even though all the studies done prior basically disproved this. And so there's a lot of buzz going around about that. So essentially, one point is that RFK talks about hepatitis B. The study looked at all vaccines, not just hepatitis B. All these vaccines were disproven to cause autism in all the subsequent studies. So it's essentially not true. Second of all, thimerosal is no longer in any of our childhood routine vaccines. I think there's like one.
It's just
Yeah, I think it's like one of the flu shot vaccines where it's
Mhm.
still present. But even after the study was done, thimerosal was taken out, and they did all these studies again that showed that even after thimerosal was taken out of the vaccines, autism is still rising. And that I think is just due to increased screening. We're better at detecting um, autism. So essentially, this whole buzz about thimerosal and autism makes zero sense.
I think what grinds my gears the most is this whole like war on autism that we're having. That's not what's going to make America healthier. And there's so many people on the spectrum that exist right now that are part of the diversity of our population and acting like it's this huge disability that prevents people from like doing anything. The comments he's made about children or people with autism who can live their lives independently, who get that extra assistance if they need it based on what their needs are, who contribute as members of society, who are wonderful people that we all know about. I think it's just so to hone in on this one thing. And then if we're like really going to be pushing this thimerosal thing, then it's going to just be even harder to give flu shots and even get flu shots. So if all these companies are like, okay, well, I guess we have to come up with a new formulation without it, in places where it's already hard to access these vaccines, then that supply is going to change and we're going to have an issue. And I mean, in the last year, you and I have both seen so many deaths from flu in the hospital. And I think up to 40% of those deaths were kids who had no medical conditions previously. So everyone who thinks, I have a healthy kid, who went through the flu, it's just a cold. Sometimes it's not. And that's why we have the vaccine in the first place. And we're just going to make it a whole lot harder on the kids, on our healthcare system, on the health ecosystem in general. Like this is such a problem.
It's such a problem. Do your own research with evidence-based studies, not just based off of Instagram and TikTok, because there's no basis to it.
Yeah. And also
Actually.
thimerosal is the form is ethyl mercury, not methyl mercury. So actually that difference in the type of mercury means that it doesn't really build up in your body exactly the same way that methyl mercury will. And you would have to get like I don't even know. You'd probably have to get shot with that flu shot over and over and over again, days on end for decades to actually see a buildup that would affect you. So you may have heard about the new RSV vaccine. I say vaccine in quotes because it's not a true vaccine, just like our other RSV options for babies. So there is a new RSV monoclonal antibody by Merck, I think, called Influenza, and I won't even try to say the generic name because I forget what it's called. But essentially, it's similar to Beyfortus, if you've heard about Beyfortus, which is the nirsevimab. And so it's also a one-shot deal, which is really nice because Beyfortus is also one shot. And it's given to newborns kind of in their first RSV season if they're less than 8 months. And I think sometimes kids can get in their second RSV season if there's some indication for it. But it's pretty similar. I think the differences are that Beyfortus was weight-based, so you either got the lower dose or the higher dose based on your weight. This one's just like a one shot for everybody, which is kind of nice. And then I think just from a perspective for us as physicians last year, we had such a big shortage of Beyfortus, we couldn't give it to everybody, which was kind
It
of
was hard.
unfortunate. So what's nice is now we have an alternative by a different company, so a different supplier, and it might even lead to competitive pricing. So it might actually be helpful for healthcare expenditure and things like that. But just to clarify, we don't get any money from this. So however it's priced, it's still a vaccine option that we can use in our offices, which I think is really great. Helping prevent RSV hospitalizations and things like that. I think similar to flu, this is another one that we see a ton, whether the kids are able to be at home or they end up in the ICU intubated because of it, which I think is great.
Yeah, RSV season will be upon us before you know it. And if, any parents, if this is your first time tuning in, we did do a whole episode on this where we talked extensively about the RSV vaccine. So if you have any questions, just pop back over to our prior episode on that.
Yeah, and I think what's great is you don't get the side effects of a vaccine that you would with this because it's an antibody. So it provides that passive immunity and you don't have to think about it like a vaccine. So if there's any hesitance around that, again, always talk to your pediatrician because they can kind of have that time to have that in-depth conversation about it.
Okay, measles update. So if you're not living under a rock, you know that measles is very much upon us. We are now, Aniksha, did you know, in the worst measles outbreak in the United States since decades?
I did know, but I didn't really want to
You
know,
didn't
you
want to
know?
know, but here we are. So, as of last week, we have over 1,200 cases in over 37 states. If anyone that's curious, I always refer to the CDC's website because they update these numbers and what states about every week. So, just important to know. I think the highest number that is out there right now is in areas in West Texas and I believe
Yeah.
in Iowa, which I think Texas was one of the initial hotspots, and it's kind of spread like wildfire since then.
Yeah, and we are seeing some cases. I think in my last few weeks of residency, we did admit at least a couple kids with measles in Southern California. I mean, if those kids travel, it goes to their places, so it certainly is, it's not just limited to those couple of places. Yeah.
Yeah. And per the CDC, I'll put some numbers up. In the age group under 5 years old, which I would say is kind of our highest risk population, just because a majority doesn't get their first measles vaccination until 1 years old. And then the second dose is 4 years old. So that leaves quite a bit of gap for like either not immunized or partially immunized folks. I think it's about 29%, and then it kind of goes up a little bit. In the 5 to 19-year range, it's about 37%, and then it's 33% in the 20 plus or older age group. But what's interesting is, about 95% were unvaccinated in all of these cases, and about 2% of the measles cases had already had one MMR dose. So from 95 to 2%,
It's
that's quite a
amazing.
drop.
Yeah.
That's such a drop.
It really just speaks to the strength of vaccines and really why we do this in the first place.
But in some like hotspot areas, or if you're traveling, pediatricians are recommending, and the AAP is recommending like an accelerated or an extra MMR dose if you are traveling, whether it's the newborn younger than 1 years old, they do recommend that. It wouldn't count towards your normal MMR vaccination schedule. You'd still get the 2 doses at 1 years old and 4 years old, but because of how fast measles is spreading, they are recommending a dose just to protect your baby if you are traveling or are living in a measles hotspot area. So I would definitely talk to your pediatrician because it may very well be a matter of your child getting measles or not.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, which is not a fun time to say the least. I think the new vaccine advisory panel too is kind of reviewing MMR and then hepatitis B, a few other vaccines too. So we'll probably see new advice on this and we can kind of report out on this in new episodes or even on our Instagram in a reel or something like that, because I'm sure there'll be something to come out of that as well. But we are still recommending that vaccine. It is still very much safe. I think we have a post on kind of the side effects and dispelling some of the myths of that vaccine. So we wholly recommend getting that vaccine on time. And if you're traveling or in an area where things are getting concerning, definitely talk to your pediatrician about getting that extra dose.
But we wanted to, trial this new segment, Pediatrics in the News, and give kind of life updates and explain why we were on such a long break, but it feels really good to be back.
Yeah, it feels really good. I think we'll get to put out more stuff more frequently too, because we'll both be in the same place at the same time. But
yeah, and we have a couple of guest episodes coming up, which we're really excited to share. So excited to record those in the next couple of months.
See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.